Welcome back. I want to go into a couple of things specifically about the prayer itself and how you handle this. But before I do that, I want to give you a little bit of a background into spiritually where you are and what you can accomplish in the life of an individual who's struggling with trauma. And some caveats that are part of that process. You and I have a great deal of ability to deal with the spiritual aspects of trauma, and I think that as believers is our responsibility to help individuals along the way. Recovery from trauma is a multi-step process. And you cannot take them from zero to completion all by yourself. And that's not the objective. It's to do what you can do to get them to the next step in the process. And so for those of you who know somebody who is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, it has become the diagnosis for everybody, even college students who don't want to listen to Ben Shapiro. So there are some things that you need to make yourself aware of. There are local resources that you need to make yourself aware of to help individuals through the next step. You can deal with the spiritual aspects of it, but you're going to have to help them, engage them in other therapies to help them get through this. Now, one of the interesting things about this is we talked about the individuals who are struggling with the results of sexual assault and so forth and so on. But one of the things that is part of this situation that seems to be overwhelming and will likely overwhelm mental health care professionals is this. We have been engaged in wars overseas in Afghanistan, Iraq, so on, for basically about 11 years. There are a number of combat veterans who came back who are still struggling with PTSD. Some of them have been diagnosed by the VA, some of them have chosen not to go to the VA. But one of the things that was discovered about 2 years ago was this, that 40% of the individuals who are diagnosed with PTSD who were in the military did not necessarily serve in a combat zone. I don't know whether we are raising individuals who do not have the capacity to deal with these difficulties, or whether or not the military itself has changed, imposing a lot of stresses, tensions, and anxieties on individuals that they didn't in the past. But the bottom line is that we are discharging every year thousands of young men who are going to have a difficult time re-engaging with their families and with their communities. And this because they are all over the United States. There is not one single collecting point that they could be marshaled into that a church could touch. So this is going to have to be one of those situations where every body of Christ must be involved. And every individual who has a love for a service member or a respect for the service in general is going to have to get engaged. To that end, we have created a website called traumaprayer.com. And on that is a prayer specifically created for military veterans who have experienced combat. Now, this prayer is a prayer that I prayed over a young man who had done 4 tours of duty in Afghanistan. He was a machine gunner. But the thing that really impacted him most is that this young man is, in redemptive gift terms, a mercy. An individual whose core, creative, is relationship. Individuals who have this gifting, this wiring, they struggle if there is something between them and another person relationally. And for this young man to do what he did on the end of a machine gun under orders violated the very core of who he was. And to such an extent that he can barely function. He said, I cannot go to sleep unless I am just close enough to being comatose that the dreams, the images, the sounds don't impact me. And of course, when you're taking that many drugs, you wake up in the morning and how he can hold down a job, I really don't know. It's impacted his wife. He will not sleep in the same bedroom with her because he is afraid that if he wakes up as a result of one of these recurring dreams, he'll do some damage he doesn't want to do. And it's my love for you says, I can't do this, so I have to separate from you. He's got 2 little kids. One of the things that each of us has to understand is the enemy is after your legacy. He attacks you because he's after your legacy. He wants to have a shot at your kids through you. And if that is your anger, if that is your emotional disconnectedness that will not allow you to give yourself to your kids, if it is your isolation because of things that you've been through, it still has that kind of an impact on a child whose identity is established by the attention of their parents. So the reality of the damage that is being done to military veterans is extraordinary. Not only because of what they are suffering, but because of what their family is exposed to. And so as a consequence, I would have you pray specifically that the church would wake up to the devastation and do what they can, more than just throw money at it, more than just pray. Get involved with the families, get involved with the individual. Learn what you can about trauma and connect with other resources in your community to help these individuals, because you have to have community in order to get healed from virtually anything. You cannot do it isolated by yourself. So ladies and gentlemen, that is your charge today. But the good thing about this is that there is no distance in the Spirit. So you can pray this trauma prayer. You can deal with spiritual issues over specific individuals over a distance. And so I've created actually another prayer that is in a book form that you can get from our website, houseofhealingministries.org. That is a prayer specifically for individuals who have a loved one or someone that they know in the service who, this is a prayer that you can pray over them and specific issues that are related to individuals struggling with combat. Okay? So I'm trying to provide some resources that'll help you get a leg up in this process. But I can't force you to do it. You just need to dive in and do what the Lord tells you to do. But it would be helpful if you'd ask him, what do you want me to do? And respond in that fashion. Well, typically when you're considering praying the trauma prayer over an individual, you've had some kind of interaction with them. You know a little bit about their story. You have conducted this secretive interview process because you're paying attention to what's going on in their lives and what they're struggling with and how it got there. Friendship is a marvelous thing because it has the ability to break down walls that nothing else can do. I'm all for praying for people. But going up to somebody cold turkey who does not know you from Adam's house cat and asking them to pray for them seldom works out very well. Relationship is the best way to accomplish this. And so even if it's a short-term kind of thing where you are more interested in them, that carries a lot of weight. So asking them questions about who they are, what they like, what they don't like, what they're struggling with, what you can pray for. These are things that help open that door. So the things that you're looking for are a real broad range. They can be the most horrific things you've ever experienced. Accidents, injuries, loss of loved ones, divorces. They can be as seemingly benign as a number of moves at peculiar times in their lives. Between the ages of 3 and 13, I moved 96 times. And so that had some impact on me personally and in dealing with some of the issues in my life. Okay? So as we said before, you had 5 kids in a family. One thing happens to everybody, but all 5 of the responses are going to be totally different. One of the kids is going to be totally destroyed. One of the other ones is going to go, I don't notice anything happened, and everything in between. And this is the same kind of thing, but you're looking for things that aren't necessarily obvious. And this is one of the reasons why you really have to follow Holy Spirit. I need you to show me what the issue is. And it may not be something that is necessarily on the front of their mind. Okay? I was ministering to a young lady last night who basically was just in this place where it just felt like she was stuck. She'd experienced a rape. She had experienced significant rejection from both of her parents as she was growing up. And so she had adopted this mindset that I have no value. And that whole thing has virtually sidelined her in so many different areas. And the Lord had me ask her this question. What would be your response if you went to the Lord and He told you nothing was wrong? And her statement was, I wouldn't believe it. You see, the issue for trauma sufferers is multiple, not only the physical and emotional things, but it's also a mental deal as well. And the enemy takes advantage of us. He is there to help us misinterpret the circumstances around every traumatic event to our own hurt. So it's one of 3 lies. It's a lie about you. It's I'm not good enough, fast enough, smart enough, pleasing enough. I'm not lovable. I'm not something. I have no value. I have no purpose. I have nothing. It's a lie about God. He doesn't care about me. He's not interested in me. He doesn't have time for me. Or something goofy like he's trying to teach me a lesson. Okay. And it's also lies about other individuals who were involved in those traumatic events. They were out to hurt me. They did this on purpose. They planned it. They don't love me. They don't care about me. They're not on my side. They are my enemy, and I have to watch out for them and people like them for the rest of my life. Okay? So in this process of helping individuals try to heal, these are some of the things we're also going to try to discover, is not only what happened, but who was part of what happened, and how do you think about it now? Okay? So we're talking about all kinds of things. Depression. Have you ever experienced depression? Depression is one of those interesting things that we are finding is almost an epidemic in our culture. The medical community itself is kind of in a quandary over it because it gets lumped in with all kinds of other autoimmune kinds of diseases. So when people are experiencing fibromyalgia, for instance, where there's significant inflammation in joints, significant long-term pain, those kinds of things, where there isn't necessarily a specific thing that you can point to, these things get piled in with a bunch of other stuff. And the medication that is given to them is often very similar to what you would give to somebody who's suicidal or depressed. And yet, it's like the reality of this is fear is at the core of this whole thing. Okay? This has nothing to do with the trauma prayer, but I got to read you this. I have a habit of sitting with the Lord fairly early in the morning, like many do, about 3 o'clock. And I ask him this question, because oftentimes it'll be just, he'll just start talking, and I don't know where he's going to go or what he's going to do. But I asked him this morning, I said, this was on the 12th, I said, speak to me about fear today. And he said, I would rather speak to you about courage. It is curious to humans that I would do this because you all have deemed that fear is your greatest enemy. You fully realize that the enemy of mankind have used it to bully and manipulate people to get their way since the dawn of time. You certainly respect its presence when there is a project that is blocked or somehow progress is frozen. You blame it for all manner of human maladies, including the manifestation of numerous human illnesses, and rightly so. And yet fear is simply the absence of courage. I have created man with a free will, the ability to choose, right or wrong, good or bad, to give or to hold on to things, to fight or flee, to love or hate, and on and on. But as my word says, I did not create you with fear. I actually created you with courage, but you chose to learn fear instead, and it has robbed mankind of many of the blessings that I have put in the earth for man's benefit. Courage is actually your birthright. It is why people are longing for affirmation, for prophetic words. And it's why they seek fortune tellers. They want to be reminded of the good things that they are capable of. Those things that lie before them and produce hope within them that their future will be better than they perceive their present to be. Those words build a measure of hope, which leads to declarations, which leads to a mild confidence, which eventually produces the courage to attempt to engage that which was prophesied. But the fact remains that this is a process of coming out of fear into courage. A process that I gave you because I did not create you with fear. I created you to be courageous. The word fear appears 385 times in my word. Sometimes fear is respect of me. Sometimes respect of collateral damage by being around something known to be dangerous. But often it is the source that paralyzes motivation. I have given humans a choice, all of them, to be courageous in the face of fear, in order that they might do that which is both in my heart and in theirs. That's really at the heart of trauma, is the fear of what happening again. And so that's one of the things that you're looking for, and you have to be cognizant of when you're engaging an individual. And it can happen in places that you least expect. I had a young lady who had been seriously injured in an automobile accident. And the ambulance came and picked her up. She was raped in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. She was raped by an orderly in the hospital. And she suffered a staph infection that took the better part of 8 weeks for her to recover from in the hospital. And during that 8-week stay in the hospital, your muscles atrophy. And so she spent another 6 weeks in therapy following it. All because of an accident that was someone else's fault on the highway. We are all aware of the danger of hospitals. It is the least safe place to be on the planet. And yet individuals go there on a daily basis to have wounds addressed, sutures made, things cut off or cut out, on and on and on. I was diagnosed with colon cancer in 2012 and had surgery. And following my surgery, I came out from under the anesthesia and realized that when I did anything backhanded, I had a serious case of neuropathy that created such incredible pain. Because during this surgery, they did not support my neck properly. And so not only was it the process of recovering from losing half my colon and the surgical situation with that, but just trying to come out from under the anesthesia, which created for me about a 4 or 5 day fog that you lived in. But then having to deal with the neuropathy that went along with it. So it's like, you got about 4 or 5 other things to deal with that are totally apart from the cancer that you suffered. So these are the same kinds of things that other individuals have experienced, okay? Broken leg or a broken arm. Our oldest son was playing baseball and got smacked in the teeth with a baseball. And so we took him to the dentist almost immediately, and the dentist said, let me look at that. And what he did is he grabbed a hold of his 2 front teeth and popped them back up into the sockets. Well, the teeth didn't die. That was God. But the shock of having that done to his front teeth has debilitated him almost, from the standpoint that he will not go to a dentist on pain of death. it's these kinds of things that impact us. Major rejections in the life of individuals, divorces, abandonment, wives discovering their husbands in pornography. Ran into a gal the other day whose husband basically became a drug addict. Got into gambling. They lost everything they had. This is what people go through. So many people also suffer from PTSD because of alcoholic or drug-addicted parents. There is no order in the household. You have to walk on eggshells. You never know when somebody's going to blow up and everything is just going to be a mess. These are all part of normal lives, and you see this so often these days. It's more common. It used to be the exception, but now it's common. Normal accidents and injuries, car accidents, things like loss of career or a company folding, a business loss, or somebody stealing from you, loss of your 401k, or massive losses in what used to be, you see a lot of people day trading. These things are significant impact on families. Major illnesses. I had a young lady who I went to high school with. She and I had mononucleosis at the same time. It took me about 6 weeks to get over it. Hers was about 7 months. She never really got back on track. So there's all kinds of things that create trauma in our lives. So as you're talking with an individual, you have to be cognizant that there are some things that you wouldn't think would create it, and yet it had a very significant impact on them as individuals. So this is part of that process of trying to ascertain, where are we going? What do we need to deal with? How significant are the symptoms of those ones that I read? How many of them do you have? What do they look like? Now, most of this you can get, particularly if it's an associate of yours or a friend of yours, you can generally pick up by observation. But invariably, you're going to have to engage them a little bit more deeply to find out how this is affected. Now, failing in that, you can do what this little 8-year-old kid that I taught this prayer to on the island of Guanaja, just off the coast of Honduras. He went up to a guy, along with his pastor. They were walking down the village street. He noticed a man who could not use his right hand. And so he just went up to him and said, "Can I pray for you?" And the guy said, "Yeah, what the heck, go ahead." So he prayed this one piece. He said, "Father God, I ask you to disconnect him from every demonic entity that's gained access to him through the motorcycle accident that he had." And he instantly recovered the use of his right hand. Okay? So there is such a thing as drive-by healings. I have found that this very thing, because the reality of trauma is, this is a strategy of a higher order demonic entity that's after you and your legacy. And just asking the Lord to deal with it. And you say, why wouldn't you deal with it in the name of Jesus? Good question. Psalm 115:16 says this: "The heavens are the Lord's heavens, and the earth he has given into the hands of men." Now, there are some strategies of the enemy, some demonic things that you and I can deal with in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. And that's the authority given to us. But when these strategies are created by higher order demonic entities, that's a little out of my authority realm. It's a little out of over my pay grade. So what I have found is simply asking the Lord to disconnect them does two things. Number one, it deals with this higher order demonic entity that is seated in the second heaven. And when that happens, the authority chain within the demonic structure tends to fall apart. And those things that were dealing with this man who had the messed up hand, that falls apart too. And so he deals with it in a very simple manner. Okay? This was an 8-year-old kid who had been saved 3 weeks. He don't know nothing about the Bible. He just saw his pastor. This is what he did. This is what I'll do. So in the situations where you run into somebody in the grocery store who obviously needs help, this is something that you can do. And if you don't pray anything else, pray this. If you don't ask the Lord to do anything else for them, do this. Because it has a very profound impact on their ability to recover, and oftentimes their healing comes along with it. When I pray this prayer over a group, fully 10% of the individuals that I pray it over get healed of something that was associated with the trauma that they experienced. And another 10% don't get healed in the meeting, but they'll go home, go to bed, wake up the next morning, and they're free of whatever it was. Okay? The reality is, Jesus, the Father himself said in Revelation 21, "I am the God who makes all things new. Write this down, for it is faithful and true." If we will stand in the place that we're supposed to stand, great benefits come to those who have been torn up by the enemy, who have had their lives wrecked. And this poor guy was having to go through life trying to make a living one-handed. In a place where it's very undeveloped area, that's extraordinarily hard to do because most everything is manual labor. So he was extraordinarily limited in all kinds of different ways economically. I don't know whether he had a family or not, but if that was the case, then his family was crippled because of his malady. So this thing is really very powerful, just simply from the standpoint of being able to disconnect them from the source, the spiritual source of the trauma that they experienced. Now, what it also does, I think one of the things that the enemy does to us, and the Word tells us that the strategy of the enemy is to wear out the saints. Okay? If you have struggled with trauma for an extended period of time, you grow weary in well-doing. You pray over here for a little while, and then you go fight the enemy over here, and then you beg God, and you wave your sword at the enemy a little while, and finally you're thinking, well, nothing is happening. I'm not dumb. I'm not doing anything, because all I'm getting is disappointed. That is the case with so many people in the earth today. They have done what they've known to do, been taught to do, and it hasn't produced anything for them. And I think part of the reason of that is this. We live specifically in America and probably Europe in a culture that prizes independence. And the reality of it is you and I are connected. We can't live this life by ourselves. We were not created to live independently. We were created to love and be loved. And so as a consequence, we can't do anything outside of community. I can't be who I'm supposed to be until you become who you're supposed to be. I can't be complete. So it is in my best interest that I do whatever I can to help you grow into the person that you're supposed to be and walk in the purpose that you were created for. And if dealing with trauma helps you on that way, let's do it. Does that make sense? See, this is that thing that the enemy wants to smack every trauma sufferer with, is isolation. I'm not doing well, things are not progressing, and so as a consequence, I don't want to have to tell my story again. I don't want to have you feel sorry for me, because it makes me feel sorry for myself. And so I back away. And what I've done is I've cut myself off from the very resource that the Lord wants to send me that allows healing to be accomplished in my life. So community and connectivity is extraordinarily important. And it's why you and I have to reach out to people. Because that's the place they're in. They're isolated. They're thinking, I'm helpless. I'm going to try this one last time and see what happens. You know, I don't know. I've talked to a number of people who have struggled with trauma, and they've stood in prayer lines. They've gone to home Bible studies. They've done all kinds of things. But eventually, this isn't working. It hasn't done what it needed to do. I'm done. The disappointment ministers to people more powerfully than a lot of things. And you are the ones who are the masters of disappointment in their lives. Because you have the ability to bring the one who heals to bear on their situation. And if it's trauma, this is the simplest of prayers to be able to say. And in this place, you are acting as a priest before God on their behalf to see to it that something significant occurs in their life. I had prayed for this person for several times, and seemingly to no effect. And for whatever reason, this is what I prayed. Father, as a favor to me, would you do this? What happened in that individual, I don't necessarily think was a result of what I prayed, so much as it was the way I prayed it. For the first time in their life, they felt like somebody was going out on a limb for them. Somebody was doing something for them that hadn't been done before. That they were willing to go before God to ask a favor. From that day on, our meetings changed. And God did do all kinds of stuff in their life. The bottom line of it is trauma is a universal thing. But you and I I believe the Lord has given us a tool that we can use, regardless of who we are or what circumstances we're in, to help better the lives of individuals, to help free them of things that have hounded them for years. Or as it was in the case of these 12 young ladies that prompted the creation of the trauma prayer, it changed their lives by being able to kill the tormenting dreams. You see, that's the thing that this thing does. That prayer all by itself kills tormenting dreams 95% of the time. The other 5% is because of occult activity, curses that have been levied against them, things of that nature. But it is so effective just to ask the Lord, Father, disconnect them from the ministry of these higher order demonic entities. And in so doing, every tormenting dream gets killed. That one aspect is freedom for an individual that they will fall in love with the Lord with forever and ever, because it answers every prayer that they prayed since they began. We're going to take a break.